Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Andrew. I'm 38 years old. And this is the story of when I caught my wife at a party I had warned her not to attend, almost naked. What happened afterwards wasn't something she thought could happen. I met Hannah when we were both fresh out of college and working our first real jobs in Chicago. She was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, social. The kind of person who knew someone at every bar and restaurant in a city. I was the guy who preferred Netflix and takeout, but Hannah brought out a side of me I didn't know existed. Hannah had this infectious energy at parties. She'd walk into a room, and within 20 minutes, she'd know half the people there. The thing about Hannah, though, was that alcohol affected her differently than most people. 2 drinks, and she'd be tipsy. 3 drinks, and she'd lose most of her filter. 4 drinks, and she'd be doing things that sober Hannah would be mortified about the next morning. I learned this about 6 months into our relationship at her coworker Priya's birthday party. I'd been in the bathroom for maybe 5 minutes, and when I came back, Hannah was on top of the kitchen counter, attempting to recreate some dance move she'd seen on TikTok. When I helped her down, she giggled and asked me what everyone was staring at. She genuinely had no idea. The next morning, when I showed her the video someone had posted on Instagram, her face went completely white. She deleted her social media for a week and barely left our apartment. That's when we had our first serious conversation about her relationship with alcohol. Hannah wasn't an alcoholic, not even close. She could go weeks without drinking and not think about it. But when she did drink, especially in social settings, something switched off in her brain. So we agreed that Hannah would still go to parties, still be social, still be herself. But she'd stick to club soda with lime or Diet Coke. It wasn't a big sacrifice for her, because she genuinely enjoyed the social aspect more than the drinking anyway. And for 2 years, it worked perfectly. Hannah and I got married in September 2019, just before everything went crazy with the pandemic. We had this small ceremony. The first year of marriage was exactly what you'd expect from newlyweds stuck in a 1-bedroom apartment during lockdown. We binged entire Netflix series, learned to cook elaborate meals we'd never attempted before, and probably had more deep conversations in those 12 months than some couples have in a lifetime. But when things started opening back up in 2021, Hannah was ready to make up for lost time. She'd spent over a year mostly indoors, and suddenly there were birthday parties to attend, new bars to try, girls' nights that had been postponed for months. Problem was, my career was taking off in ways I hadn't expected. I'd started as a junior developer at a fintech startup, and by 2021, I was leading a team of 6 people working on a project that could make or break the company. The hours were brutal, and there were stretches where I'd come home so mentally exhausted that I could barely hold a conversation. Hannah tried to include me in her social life, but I was usually either working or recovering from work. The first red flag I should have paid attention to happened in March 2022. Hannah had gone to her friend Zoe's bachelorette party, one of those all-day affairs that started with brunch and ended at some club I'd never heard of. I was working late that Saturday, probably around 11 p.m., when my phone started buzzing with Instagram notifications. Someone had tagged me in a story. Then another. Then 5 more in the span of 10 minutes. The first video showed Hannah and 5 other women at what looked like a rooftop bar, doing shots. Hannah was wearing this bright red top and clearly already tipsy, laughing at something off camera. The second video was from maybe an hour later. Hannah was dancing on what appeared to be a chair, with a crowd of strangers cheering her on. But it was the third video that made my chest tight. Hannah was at the bar, and some guy I'd never seen before had his hands on her waist, helping her down from whatever she'd been standing on. She was laughing, he was laughing, and his hands stayed on her waist for what felt like forever. I watched that video probably 20 times that night. Hannah didn't get home until 4 a.m., and when I tried to talk to her about it Sunday morning, she was so hungover she could barely keep her eyes open. When I showed her the videos Monday evening, her reaction was immediate and devastating. She started crying. She explained that Zoe had insisted everyone do a shot to celebrate, and Hannah had convinced herself that one shot wouldn't hurt. Then the maid of honor bought a round. Then someone else bought a round. By the time she realized how drunk she was getting, she was already too drunk to make good decisions. Hannah swore nothing happened beyond what was in the video, and I believed her. But the fact that she'd broken our agreement about drinking, and that she'd been in a position where some stranger felt comfortable putting his hands on her, gave me thoughts that didn't go away for weeks. We had a long conversation that night about boundaries and expectations. Hannah apologized profusely and promised it wouldn't happen again. She said she'd be more careful, more aware of how much she was drinking. She'd make sure her friends knew to watch out for her. By early 2023, I thought we'd found our rhythm again. My project at work had launched successfully, and while I was still busy, my workload had dropped to a more manageable 50 to 55. Hannah had settled into a routine of going out maybe twice a month, always with the same group of friends, always sticking to her no alcohol rule. Then, in March, Hannah told me that her friend Kelsey was throwing herself a 30th birthday party. When I saw the flyer on Kelsey's Instagram story later, it was a Saturday night house party that was explicitly advertised as adults only. And what happens here stays here on the Facebook event page. But my wife didn't mention that part. Kelsey was the single friend in Hannah's group, the one who was always pushing boundaries, always suggesting they go to the club with a reputation for getting wild, from my silent observation. She wasn't a bad person, but she lived her life like she was still in college, and she had a way of bringing out that side in Hannah. When the event's date drew closer, Hannah reminded me about the party one Wednesday evening. I was honest about my concerns as I reminded her about the bachelorette party incident, about how those kinds of parties had a way of getting out of hand. I suggested maybe she could take Kelsey out for a nice birthday dinner instead, something more low-key. Hannah's response surprised me. She said she'd been thinking the same thing, that maybe she was getting too old for house parties anyway. She'd been feeling lately like she needed to act more like a married woman and less like she was still in her early 20s. I was relieved and, honestly, a little proud of her for coming to that conclusion on her own. But then Friday rolled around, and Hannah came home from work with a different energy. She'd been talking to Kelsey, who was apparently really hurt that Hannah wasn't coming to her birthday party. Kelsey had said she understood that Hannah was married now, but that she'd hoped her oldest friend would at least show up to wish her happy birthday. Hannah felt guilty. She'd been friends with Kelsey since high school, and Kelsey had been her maid of honor. She didn't want to be the friend who got married and disappeared. So Hannah proposed a compromise. She'd go to the party, but I'd come with her. That way, she'd have someone to keep an eye on her, make sure she didn't drink too much or stay too late. She'd show her face, wish Kelsey happy birthday, and we'd leave early. The last thing I wanted to do that Saturday was go to a house party when I had a lot on my plate. I was already trying to meet a deadline as the head of the IT team in the company I work for, and being exhausted, any free time I get, I use it for resting. I explained all of this to Hannah as gently as I could. I told her I was too tired to be good company at a party, that I'd probably just bring down the mood by obviously wanting to leave. I suggested she make it up to Kelsey with something other than going to the party. Hannah's reaction was immediate and angry. She said I was being selfish about what I do, but controlling with what she does. She claimed that I was trying to isolate her from her friends by making it difficult for her to maintain those relationships. I'd never thought of myself to be controlling. I was expressing legitimate concerns based on past experience, setting reasonable boundaries for our marriage. But hearing her say it made me question everything. I tried to explain that it wasn't about control, it was about wisdom, about learning from past mistakes, about the fact that parties like this had a track record of ending badly for us. But Hannah was done listening. She said I was being insecure and paranoid, that I was punishing her for something that had happened over a year ago, something she'd already apologized for and promised wouldn't happen again. The conversation went in circles for an hour. Finally, I said what I probably should have said from the beginning, that I wasn't comfortable with her going to this particular party, given the context and the people involved, and that if she chose to go anyway, it would feel like a violation of the trust we'd rebuilt after the bachelorette party incident. Hannah stared at me for a long moment, then said I was being ridiculous. She said she was an adult who could make her own decisions about her friendships, and that if I couldn't trust her to go to a birthday party, Then we had bigger problems than I was willing to admit. Then she walked out of the room, and we didn't speak for the rest of the night. Saturday morning was tense. Hannah made coffee, but didn't offer me any. I made breakfast and gave her some, which she rejected. We moved around each other in our apartment like polite strangers. Around noon, I decided to go say hello to my friend who lived around the corner. I told Hannah I would be gone for a while, but she ignored me. I wanted to believe that she would not disobey me when I was away. When I got to my friend's place that Saturday afternoon, we spent hours catching up and talking about anything and everything. I came home around 6:30 p.m., right when it was getting dark, to find the house empty. Fearing the obvious, I called her and she told me she decided to go to dinner with her sister Melissa since I left her at home, that Melissa was having some problems with her boyfriend and needed someone to talk to. She said she might be out late, that they might go see a movie after dinner. I asked which restaurant they were going to. She said they hadn't decided yet, probably somewhere downtown. I didn't believe her because every answer felt rehearsed. Every detail felt like something she'd prepared in advance. But I didn't call her out on it because I was hoping against hope that I was wrong. I tried to go back to work, but I couldn't concentrate. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a text from her. But by 9 p.m., I hadn't heard anything. I texted her at 9:30. Hope you and Melissa are having a good dinner. Love you. No response. I called her at 10:15. The phone went straight to voicemail, which meant she turned it off. That's when I knew for certain she wasn't with her sister. That was when an idea came to my mind. Her car has a tracker we had installed for protection against theft. I installed it myself, and it's connected to my phone. I decided to track it that night, which wasn't hard. I put on jeans and a hoodie, grabbed my car keys, and drove to where the car was parked. I needed to see for myself exactly what kind of party my wife had chosen over our marriage. It wasn't a restaurant or a cinema. The house was exactly what I'd expected. A narrow 2-story building squeezed between identical houses, with a small front yard and stairs leading up to a covered porch. Every window was lit up, and the music and laughter could be heard from half a block away. There were people on the front porch smoking cigarettes and talking loudly. The front door was propped open, and people were wandering in and out freely. It was the kind of party where anyone could walk in and blend into the crowd. I parked across the street, got out of my car, and walked up to the house. I walked through the front door like I belonged there. No one questioned me or asked who I was. The living room was packed with people dancing, talking, laughing. The music was loud enough that I couldn't make out individual conversations unless I was standing right next to someone. I spent the first few minutes just scanning the room, looking for Hannah. The lighting was dim, and it was hard to make out faces clearly, especially with everyone moving around constantly. I made my way through the living room toward the kitchen. More people, more drinks, more loud conversations. Still no sign of Hannah. When I asked if anyone had seen Hannah, a woman pointed toward the back of the house and said she thought she'd seen someone matching that description heading toward the bathroom earlier. I followed her directions through the kitchen and down a short hallway. There was a line for the bathroom. 3 women waiting, all holding drinks. Hannah wasn't in the line. The woman at the front of the line noticed me standing there and asked if I was waiting for the bathroom too. When I explained that I was looking for my wife, she gave me a confused look. Apparently, she didn't know anyone was married either. I described Hannah again. She thought for a moment, then said she remembered seeing someone like that, but not recently. She suggested I check upstairs. The stairs were at the front of the house, near the main entrance. I climbed them slowly, not sure what I was expecting to find. The second floor was quieter than the first, but still clearly occupied. I could hear voices coming from multiple rooms. There were 4 doors on the second floor. 2 were open. One was clearly Kelsey's bedroom, with about 6 people sitting on the bed and floor, having what looked like a more intimate conversation. The other was a bathroom where the door was propped open and no one was inside. 2 doors were closed. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. From behind one of the closed doors, I could hear what sounded like 2 people talking quietly. From behind the other closed door, I heard a familiar voice. From her laugh, I could tell she was drunk. I stood outside that door for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 30 seconds. I turned the doorknob and opened the door. The room was small, probably meant to be an office or a spare bedroom. There was a desk pushed against one wall, a bookshelf, and a small couch that looked like it had been bought at a college furniture sale. Hannah was on that couch. She wasn't completely naked, but she might as well have been. The black dress she'd left the house in was bunched up around her waist. Her bra was unhooked, hanging off one shoulder. Her hair, which had been perfectly styled when she left our apartment, was disheveled and stuck to her forehead with sweat. On top of her was a man I'd never seen before. His hands were on parts of my wife's body that no one except me should be touching. They were so drunk and focused on each other that it took them a few seconds to notice the door had opened. Hannah saw me first. Her face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, horror, and then something that looked almost like relief. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. Neither did I. I looked at her face, with her eyes struggling to focus on me. Then I looked at him, clearly trying to figure out who I was and whether he was about to get punched. The entire scene lasted maybe 3 seconds. 3 seconds that condensed 4 years of marriage, months of arguments about boundaries and trust, and hours of detective work into one crystal-clear moment of understanding. My wife had chosen this. She had lied to me, snuck out of our apartment, driven across the city, walked into this house, climbed these stairs, and made a series of deliberate decisions that led to this moment. This wasn't a mistake or an accident or a moment of poor judgment. This was a choice. I turned around and walked out of the room, closing the door behind me. I don't remember walking down the stairs or through the living room or out the front door. I don't remember getting in my car or driving home. I have no memory of the drive from Kelsey's house to our apartment. What I do remember is sitting in our guest room, trying to process what I'd just seen. I kept thinking about the details. I thought about all the conversations we'd had about trust and boundaries. All the promises she'd made after the bachelorette party incident. All the times she'd accused me of being controlling or insecure when I'd expressed concerns about her behavior at parties. Turns out I hadn't been controlling or insecure. I'd been right. Instead of calling anyone or trying to figure out what to do next, I just sat there in the dark, feeling something I'd never felt before. At 1:15 a.m., I heard Hannah's key in the door. She came into the living room slowly, like she was expecting me to be waiting for her, which I was. I stepped out of the guest room. She still looked disheveled, though she'd clearly tried to fix her hair and makeup in the car. Her dress was wrinkled, and she was carrying her heels instead of wearing them. She sat down on the chair across from me. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then Hannah started to cry. She tried to explain. She said it wasn't what it looked like, that nothing had really happened, that they were just talking and things got out of hand. She said she'd had too much to drink, that she wasn't thinking clearly, that she never meant for anything like this to happen. I let her talk until she ran out of words. Then I told her I was done with the marriage. I moved out of our apartment 3 days after the party. Hannah begged me to stay, to go to counseling, to give her another chance to prove she could be the wife I deserved. She promised she'd never drink again, never go to parties again, never see Kelsey or any of those friends again. But the problem wasn't drinking or parties or friends. The problem was that my wife was the kind of person who could look me in the eye and promise not to do something, then do exactly that thing while lying about where she was and who she was with. The problem was that when faced with a choice between respecting our marriage and doing whatever she wanted in the moment, she chose herself every time. The problem was that I couldn't trust her anymore, and without trust, we didn't have a marriage worth saving. The divorce was finalized months later. I left the apartment for Hannah since we were renting. I got most of our savings since I'd been the primary earner. We split everything else down the middle. I found out later, through mutual friends, that the guy from the party was someone named Bryce, who was a friend to Kelsey. Hannah had met him earlier that evening, and according to people who were there, they'd been flirting and drinking together for most of the night before they disappeared upstairs. So it wasn't even someone she'd been having an ongoing affair with. It was just some random guy she decided was worth destroying our marriage for. Hannah tried to reach out a few times in the first couple months after I moved out. Text messages apologizing, emails asking if we could talk, voicemails explaining how sorry she was and how much she missed me. I never responded. What would have been the point? Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't driven to that house that night. If I just waited for Hannah to come home and confronted her then, would she have been able to lie her way out of it? Would I have believed her? I'm glad I'll never know the answer to that question. What I saw that night, as devastating as it was, gave me clarity. It showed me exactly who my wife really was when she thought no one was watching. And that person wasn't someone I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. The moment I opened that bedroom door, I didn't just see my wife cheating on me. I saw the end of our marriage, the end of my trust, and the beginning of whatever comes next. It took 6 months to make official, but our marriage really ended in those 3 seconds when I stood in that doorway, watching the woman I'd promised to love forever choose a stranger over the life we'd built together. I've never regretted walking away. Thank you for watching.